Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast. My name is Nathan Sutherland, and this podcast is dedicated to helping families love God and use tech. Today, we are continuing our conversation on pornography and how we can walk in freedom is the title of the series. We have talked so far about pornography being a lie, about the research, and about the good news of the gospel, about why that is our foundation for change, because we got to change from the inside. And there are very practical ways to walk in the freedom that Christ calls us to. So then today we're going to talk about how do we parent pornography? How do we not simply raise porn-proof kids that would never see it, or if they ever saw it, they would never be tempted because they're so good because we are so good, that we can parent our kids, parent our people, into never making a mistake. And that is not the conversation for today. Instead, today's conversation is how do we make our children porn resilient? I like this idea because in a pornified culture like America, where simple ads, to the point where we don't even think about it, are selling sexual innuendo. They're selling sexual attraction. They're selling both your desire to be attracted and people who are attractive. That's America. I mean, we're not just talking pornography you find on the internet with people not wearing any clothes. We're talking about a culture that pornographizes everything. Everything has sexual undertones to it, to the point where we don't even necessarily notice it. We hear other cultures complain about America and our ads and our images and our portrayals and our music, but we're like, I don't know, this is just who we are. So in that culture, we are trying to then raise up kids who can spot it for what it is. This is preying on my lusts, on my desire to be desired, on my wanting to feel good on my terms and my timing. These are all pieces that go into how America portrays sexual interactions and sex as, well, a distorted version of what is actually sex, whereas it's a covenant between a man and a woman before God. That's an echo of God's greater relationship with his church. There's the purpose of marriage is intimacy, is relationship, two people committed under a covenant, meaning I commit to you for better or worse, richer or poorer. That isn't biblical language, but it's a biblical concept. It's what God said to Israel, and then repeatedly took Israel back, even though Israel was repeatedly unfaithful. Read, I don't know, Jeremiah or Isaiah, and look at this idea of God's unilateral one way from Genesis 15, where he makes a covenant with Abraham, repeatedly saying, but for the covenant, but for the promise I've made, but for I'm going to keep a seed alive. I'm going to keep a remnant. I'm going to keep my promise, even though you don't. That's what we're trying to raise our children up when we're talking pornography, is to be people of promise, to be people who understand pornography is a thing and deliberately don't want it, right? That is where I can watch my heart grow over years. Is for a long season, I was just trying to not be bad, as Pastor Tim, not Keller, Steve Shell says. Steve Shell says, we often as Christians just try to stay saved, right? I just don't want to mess up bad. And so I'm not going to step out because I keep getting blasted spiritually. I'm not going to take any risks. I'm not going to share the gospel. I'm not going to pray for people because I'm just not good enough and I'm not there. I'm going to stay saved. I'm going to show up for church and not do the bad stuff and just kind of hunker down. I'm not going to say you're not saved in that environment, but that's not our goal for our children. Our goal is to see them live in the freedom they were set free for. That when Jesus says it's for freedom, or when Paul says about Jesus, for freedom that we've been set free, the idea there's freedom in Christ, not because we're good enough now, but because he is. So define it, talk it out, build a hedge. These are our three sections of how do we parent pornography. And the next week, we'll even get a little more practical on this, but I think of it as episode 4A and B, if you will, because it would be too long to do as one. I wanted to break it in half. First, we're going to define it. We need a definition, a working definition for pornography. It needs to certainly include that. I like this with good pictures, bad pictures. The definition of pornography. Pornography means pictures, videos, or even cartoons of people with little or no clothes on that focus on the private parts of the body that we keep covered with a swimsuit. I like that. That's good pictures, bad pictures. You can get it on Amazon. It's a collaborative read where you read it with your child, not just to them. And there's a junior version that goes down to 5 and 6 year olds, and the older version is 7, 8, 9. As soon as you're getting into 10, you're going to have to go more with an actual, maybe a conversation about what Jesus says. So if we go Matthew 5, 28 through 30, where Jesus says, If your right eye causes you to sin, you gouge it out. And if your right hand causes you to sin, you cut it off, because it's better to be going through life without your right eye or your right hand than to be thrown into the fires of hell whole. And his commentary on that is, if you look lustfully at a woman, is the premise of that statement. If you look lustfully at a woman, we need to remember the context he's speaking into. He's not talking about a culture where there are people, flaunting the private parts of their body. In fact, this is a culture. The rule of the day would say, if you get caught, say, having sex outside of marriage or committing adultery, you get stoned to death. If you were to flaunt your body, you could receive physical punishment. So women were expected to wear robes that were covering their whole body. So the culture that Jesus is speaking to about, don't let your heart lust after somebody else, don't use someone else's likeness for your selfish gratification. Jesus is speaking to a culture that's much closer to Taliban-controlled Afghanistan than it is to the United States of America. And he tells that culture, gouge out your eye, cut off your hand. So while we want this definition of pornography to recognize there are naked people on there and they're bad for your heart, it's bad for them, it's bad for you. In this conversation, we're going to acknowledge, yes, there's naked people, but we actually want a little more than that. It doesn't matter if it's a naked person. It might be a Macy's catalog. It might be an ad on TV. It might just be something your heart invents about somebody you saw. All of that is lust if you are taking the likeness of someone else and using it for selfish gratification. That's the standard Jesus gives us in Matthew 5. That's the standard we need to pass on to our children. Be that explicitly by saying those words. Certainly there's a point for that. But as younger children, recognizing that your body is good, so equip them with that truth so they can spot a lie. When we define pornography, we're taking away the darkness that goes into these lies, because Matthew 5:28 tells us that pornography goes deeper than just naked people. It goes to our hearts. With that in mind, we've defined it. Then we need to be able to talk about it. So once we have a working definition, we've empowered our kids to say the words. So now your kid would be able to tell you, oh, I saw. Or if there's a mistake made, so we have, for example, filtering on our internet. And if I see a mistake made, my goal is not to go after someone and go, I saw you made a mistake, but I've porn-proofed you and you've disappointed me. That's not the point of sin. The point of sin is not disappointing your parent. The point of sin is this is killing you. And if left unchecked, unaddressed, and unrepented, this will lead to death of relationship, death of spiritual growth, death of your soul. Like, you will end up hardening yourself to protect your sin so God can't get to it. And that's my number one job as a parent, is to help you see sin and then to help you bring it to God, because I can't do it for you. I can go before the Lord, I can intercede for you, but at the end of the day, this is you and God. So I've got to parent you in that. That's what I'm trying to do here with giving you the words, and then we're going to go talk it out. I love Birds and Bees, is a mom, grandma, Instagram, internet group who talks about sex and behavioral development and children. And their short definition of how do you talk about porn is be medical, be matter of fact, and move on. I love that quote. You've got to say the parts. If I were to paraphrase what they're saying there, you have to say penis and vagina, because they're not bad words. You need to actually say them. It's all right. If you want to say wiener because it's easier in public, like, I'm going to let you get away with that. That's your decision, but you have to at least say the words with your children without blushing. If you have to stand in front of the mirror and say it 20 times out loud before you go talk to your kids, fine. But get used to saying the word. These words are not bad. You might have baggage. You might have trauma. You might have been brought up in a culture where we just don't say these words, and I get that, but that's not our best. God made these parts of us. They were made good, and they were part of his greater plan. And so we need to teach our children to say the words, because they need to be equipped to talk about their bodies and recognize sex isn't bad, your body isn't bad, and there's appropriate and inappropriate times for this. Our culture has rules on how you stay clothed in public. Our minds and hearts have rules for how we participate with others in these ways, because when you sin with your body, specifically in sex, you're sinning with more than just an intention. You're actually sinning with the temple of God, that he is indwelling. And this, we are told, is to be done with great precaution, that when you commit yourself sexually to someone, that there's a lot going on there, because you're actually sinning with the vessel, not just around the vessel. And the reason that matters is not that you're now damaged goods, having had sex outside of marriage or having had a relationship that was inappropriate, but instead because it it makes a lie about intimacy and a lie about ourselves. People who have been sinned against sexually, yes, there was a sin there, but there's also another layer now that brings lies into relationship, into intimacy, into their identity. And those have to be called out and repented of. We have to actually go after the lies that are done to people because of sexual sin, and pornography is one of those areas. It's a lie, it's a sexual sin, and we take it into our hearts with adultery, with sex outside of marriage. It is a lie about what's going to bring us satisfaction and intimacy and closeness and what it means to be loved. Though there are lies, little itty bitty lies, but they're powerful and we believe them in it. Inevitably, if we claim them for long enough, we just give up. So we talk about our body parts to bring some normalcy to this is good. Sex is good. Your body is good. There's a time and a place. There's a correct way and an incorrect way. Be matter of fact. Be medical. And then just move on, meaning you don't sit knee to knee, eye to eye, and just stare at them until they say, I will never make such a mistake, Mom and Dad. We're not trying to emotionally bludgeon them into it. You can go on a walk. You can throw a ball. You can just do it in passing. If you hear them flippantly reference something from school that you're pretty sure they don't know what that means, and it definitely has sexual undertones, you can just bring it up. In fact, Birds and the Bees was the group who, and this, I'm not trying to traumatize you with this, but I experienced this both in professional speaking and then in middle school teaching. Kids will decide they like to get a rise out of people, so they want to make people uncomfortable. They want to make awkward humor. It's just kind of their way. And some of them will eventually figure out moaning. And they will either figure it out because they've seen something on the internet and they think it's funny to make it uncomfortable for other people, or they've just seen other people do it and now they're mimicking it. And it's really uncomfortable when some 8th grade boy starts making moaning noises in your class of 34, 35, because to call them out is to acknowledge what they're doing, which gives them power. And you're like, do I just let this keep going and just pretend like I don't hear it or I don't know what that is, and I'm just going to move on? Or do you call it out? And effectively, they've won at this point, right? Everyone smirks and laughs and elbows, and that kid might get in trouble, but like nobody cares. And Birds and the Bees had a great approach. They simply stop. And they're like the mom-grandma combo, go, you acknowledge, hey, that's a sound somebody makes when they're experiencing pleasure, like when you're eating a good food. And then when I heard this, I was like, oh, it's What About Bob, right? If you've ever seen the movie What About Bob, that's a perfect reference. When he's eating corn on the cob, it's just, right? It is way over the top, but that's moaning. Like he's experiencing pleasure from the hand-shucked corn. And to say, hey, that's what people do when they experience pleasure. And that's inappropriate to do right now because it's distracting to us. And then you just move on. And if the kid keeps doing it, now they're in trouble for repeatedly disobeying and distracting the class on purpose. You never had to address sex. You never had to address what the pleasure was coming from. And it's an acceptable response to pleasure. That's okay, but not in a learning environment or in a way that's distracting or making people uncomfortable. And I love how just you used the words, you called it what it was. You were very clear. You weren't inappropriate, didn't scar anyone's mind. In fact, me explaining it to you is probably more traumatic than just the initial conversation of, hey, that's moaning. That's what people do when they experience pleasure, and let's move along, please. I love it. I wish I'd heard that when I was a middle school teacher, and I hope it helps you as a parent because middle schoolers, man, they'll get your goat. All right, so we're going to be medical. And then we're going to say things like what Greta Eskridge at Ma and Pa Modern, she says this, just like we don't show strangers our private parts, we don't want to see other people's private parts. So if we ever see those pictures or movies on a computer or phone, or if someone shows them to us, we look away, then we tell a safe grown-up what we saw. You won't be in trouble for seeing it. Talking about it as how we keep you safe. And again, this is a direct quote from Greta Eskridge. I'll put it in the show notes. How about that? You're welcome to put it on a little card and say it a couple sentences at a time if you don't feel like you could say the whole thing. You're welcome to read it out loud. All these are acceptable responses, but I wanted to just point out that that's the kind of thing we want to say when we're talking it out, and then be intentional in talking about the context of this, that their body is good and that they can protect it and they can always come to you. They're not going to get in trouble. Yes, if they made a mistake on purpose, they're not going to get in trouble because you removing something harmful isn't punishing them, right? So if you happen to remove a piece of technology or a social media platform, you're not doing that for the point of punishing them so they'll learn a lesson. You're doing it because this thing is unsafe, and those are important. And then finally, we build a hedge. And our hedges are going to be around our family, and then our devices and our network.
Parents, as we strive to raise kids who love God and use tech, it's intimidating to look at this next stage of life and think about what academics may look like for them. When you're thinking about college, consider George Fox University for your children because of three things. First, it's going to give you a more intimate, known environment where they have a focus on being known personally, academically, and spiritually. Your child will grow in their faith. 93% of undergrad students at George Fox last year, through the 2025 academic year, said that being at George Fox has helped them grow in their relationship with Jesus. We also want them to grow academically, which means being a part of a university with rigorous academic standards and opportunities to be engaged. They have a nationally recognized engineering, nursing, and education programs, as well as chances to study abroad here within the U.S. and then internationally. And finally, personally, to be part of a vibrant campus atmosphere where you can play intramural sports or part of their NCAA Division III athletic programs with 23 sports available. The goal here is to go to a place that's going to support your goals, not try to make you support theirs. To have that goal be to raise you up to be all God's called you to be, and to truly equip your young person with in my case, my sons or my daughter, to love God, and then from their love of God to go wherever God has called them. And that includes being equipped with a degree that'll help them do that, to be missionally equipped, to love and serve others, to lead where God has planted them, and to know the gospel for themselves, to be able to share it with others. So George Fox University is an amazing resource for our kids, for our community here in the Northwest, and for anyone who's looking to raise up a young person who can love God and from that, love others.
We start first with the relational, conversational part of protecting our family. Because yes, you can build great hedges technologically around your devices and your network, and those are good, especially for accidental mistakes. We've talked before, 58% of kids who have seen pornography saw it on accident. That's important. They didn't type into the search history. They didn't go scrolling for it. They were just doing their life and they found pornography. We're going to set first our time. When do we use it? For how long and for how often? Those are the three aspects of time. When do we use it? Can I get on the internet before you're awake? Can I get on the internet before school? Can I get on the internet after school? Can I get on the internet during meals? Like, when can I be using it? And then for how long? Strongly encourage you to pick a time of day, to pick a chunk of time, and to give it to them all at once. This is showtime. This is game time. This is social media time. You can use it and then you need to walk away. So that's the first piece, is time. The second one is place. Where? For example, no meal time. You don't get entertainment technology at meals. We're going to turn off the TV unless it's like some kind of special movie night. We want to eat, and like we did that growing up, and we didn't have regular television. We just had Focus on the Family movies. So we would sit down, eat a meal, and watch movies together on a Friday night. That was very fun. It was something we looked forward to. Okay. I'm saying on the daily, whatever your family meal is, you all eat breakfast together, you all come home for lunch, you all have dinner, but you're going to have a family meal. You're going to do that without personal technology. You're not catching up on work email. You are not catching up on social media. You're not playing a video game, watching a show. You're going to sit here and you're going to be with one another. I was going to say enjoy time with one another, but sometimes it's not enjoyable because people talk slower, it's not your turn, or you're just not invested in these humans because you like the world to be about you. That's the cool part about social media and video games. It's always you. It's you saving the universe. It's you having followers and likes and people to talk to. It's all about you, and there just happen to be other people involved, but not at dinner. At dinner, it's strangely about other people, and that can be disturbing. It's also very important. So, places, we're not going to have entertainment technology at the dinner table. We're also not going to have entertainment technology in our bedrooms. We're not going to have smart TVs, gaming consoles, personal devices, laptops. I would go so far as to say we're not going to do Kindles and e-readers. I would do analog books, rent one from the library, buy one every week if you have to. Just say, this is your bedtime book. You don't take it to school. It doesn't go on the bus. This is just what you read at bedtime. They'll probably make it a week. If your kid's reading 3 hours in bed every night, like that's probably a conversation point. Like, yes, even reading can be an impediment to sleep. Anyone who's read a good book knows this, right? Like I have books I cannot read during busy times of year because like I quit sleeping and I got to stay up till 1 to figure out how this chapter ends. And it's always a cliffhanger. So I read the next one. Like, that's how you know you have a compulsive personality, when reading is a sleeping problem. But there are young people that this will happen. So keep that in mind. But by and large, books are going to be less distracting than things that are equipped with the internet, that come with blue light, because it does stimulate your brain, and nobody needs a $1,000 alarm clock. So we like the next Lexon Flip Plus. I think it's now $40 on Amazon, but it's 2 AAA batteries, works for 6 months. So buy 4 AAA batteries and you're good for a year. With that in mind, though, you need a simple alarm clock to get you up, to help you process your day. And while there are outstanding, or outlying situations like someone with diabetes and the smartphone's part of your monitoring system, I understand that. Okay, there might be a place. So I had a family with a diabetic child come up and say, hey, this is our situation, and the phone is still a problem. Well, you can use things like guided access and just lock it into the monitor mode so your child's not accessing the social media and stuff that's on this device. Or there is a spot where if your child's being really unsafe and really sneaky and is getting into unsafe, harmful content during sleep hours, and you have to have this device for safety, these are the times that we look at investing in something like a pump. Like maybe we actually have to go with an insulin pump now and have the machine monitor for you and deliver the insulin for you. And like, it's a big investment, but again, that could be cutting off a hand, gouging out an eye. Like, we're going to make a sacrifice to make this happen, because I can't just say, well, you need to be unsafe for your safety. Like, there's irony in that. So again, this isn't for everyone. I'm telling you, I had a family come to me and say, we have a child who's deliberately breaking the system, who's not allowing us to keep the phone safe, but needs the phone for monitoring blood sugar levels. And my actual suggestion to them and to you, or to anyone who might be wrestling with that, is maybe it's time for an insulin pump. Build a hedge around your family with time, with place, and then with content. 3 verses to walk through the content. I'm going to start with just because you can doesn't mean you should. We're going with 1 Corinthians 6:12. Says, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be dominated by anything. I like this as an example of just because it isn't bad doesn't mean you should do it. Right? Or just because you can doesn't mean you should. Like this is our first standard of how do we delineate on the things that aren't morally wrong. Like, sure, if it's pornography, morally wrong. If the point of this video game is murder, death, kill, and it doesn't line up with what God tells us in the Bible should be our heart and our posture, then all right, you can just say no on its face. But then you have these gray areas, and you're going to have to talk through what's our family. Again, with shooter games, it comes down to Fortnite. Fortnite for your family is either your child playing Hunger Games and murdering all of his or her friends, or your child playing laser tag and just having a good time out there playing, a fun game with friends in a new way. There's real sounding guns, but they disappear in a flash of light. Where are you on that? That's the conversation to have with your kid when we talk about content. Just because you can play it doesn't mean you should, though. Maybe that's not something you want to celebrate. I have friends who don't let their children play with Nerf guns, and I respect that. My children use airsoft, but I have friends who are like, no, we've experienced trauma. We believe this is a situation with the world. We're not going to participate in this, and we're not going to let our children participate in it. Okay, you've had the conversation. I believe your convictions. I think you're biblically sound in doing that. Go for it. I have a different stance from my family, and I also believe I'm biblically sound in this. So just because you can doesn't mean you should. You want to talk out content with your kids, the music they listen to, the shows they watch, the games they play. We want to talk through, what is this doing to our hearts? What is this celebrating? Is this something you're actually old enough? There's some things that I think are fine, and I've just told my kids, no, you can't engage that yet because the conversation is too hard. It's just, there's too much going on. In fact, one of the examples I just suggested today for Owen, he's now 5th grade, The Giver by Lois Lowry. Great book. I taught it in 8th grade because we had some kids that really wrestled with reading and being reading engaged. And it was one of the first books they'd ever been mad at. If you've never read The Giver, don't watch the movie. Read the book. It's short. It's delightful. You could probably read it in a day. It's like 130 pages, but like 130 pages with big font and wide margins. So it's a good story, but it brings up some heavy stuff. Short version, what would you give up for a perfect world, and would it be worth it? So it's good, but like you got to be a certain age before you engage that. So yes, you could read that at a 1st grade level, 2nd grade level. If you're an advanced reader, doesn't mean you should. I would challenge you to think the same thing about your shows, movies, books you read, music you listen to. Once we've talked about content in terms of just because you can doesn't mean you should, well, there actually is a standard. Philippians 4:8 says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, Whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is anything excellent, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. We're to set our minds on things that fit this list. True, honorable, just, pure, lovely, commendable, excellent, praiseworthy. Like that's a really good start if you want to talk through shows, music, video games, books. Start with that and walk through what does that look like. And again, maybe you're like, you know what? There's nothing wrong with this book. Then you go back to our 1 Corinthians. But is it a good fit for our family right now? Again, nothing wrong with The Giver. But there are some kids I'd be like, you're not ready for this conversation yet. Or anytime I had a kid show up in 8th grade and be like, I read this in 1st grade, be like, I get it. There's very little chance you address the themes of this book well in 1st grade though. So that's what we're trying to walk through with our kids. The next is then we look at the fruit of the content. So I gave it to you because I assessed it was safe. We said, yes, we can, and I think we should. The description of it is very Philippians 4:8. It's lovely, and it's pure, and it's excellent, praiseworthy, cool. And then you use it, and the fruit's not great, right? It doesn't produce love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and gentleness and faithfulness and self-control. Instead, it produces envy and lust and anger and dissension and greed, and it produces these bad fruits from Galatians 5:19-21. So then I remove it and I give you something else. Maybe just a different version of the same sort of technology. Maybe, hey, we're not going to use that platform. We're going to use this one. Or maybe it's just, nope, we're not going to use that at all. We're not going to play video games. We're going to play board games. That's my house. Or we're not going to listen to that artist at all. We're going to listen to this artist. Or we're only going to listen to music as a group. We're not going to listen with earbuds while we're at home. Whatever your standard might be, you're going to need to talk that out based on 1 Corinthians 6:12, Philippians 4:8, and Galatians 5:22. That's how we determine our content. What will we ingest as a family? It's going to take some legwork. And I would simply say, if it feels like it's just too much, you can't figure out beforehand, before you give them that book or that album or that show, don't watch it. Don't engage it, because then you don't have the strength and the endurance to parent once something goes wrong. So we've built a hedge around our time, our place, our content, and then safety, part A and B. Safety for strangers. First, stranger danger on the internet is real. If you're allowing your child to go online, they need to know that there are strangers. It's not everyone on the internet's their friend, that some people are not safe strangers. So first, if there's someone that has like an adult profile, so this is not a child, who wants to be their friend, we tell our children, adults are friends with adults, kids are friends with kids. If that adult says they need a friend, you come and tell an adult so we can be their friend. It's all you have to tell them. That goes for real world people at parks, that goes for digital people on the internet. But they need to know that there are strangers that aren't always looking out for their best interests. You don't have to freak them out with stories of being abducted in vans and stuff. Like, that's what we were told in the 90s, and it's not super helpful. But it is important to recognize there are unsafe adults. We don't just trust them because they have faces, which brings us to our third point. They might go, well, where do you live? How old are you? Right? How tall are you? Like, they want to get personal details from you. How many siblings do you have? Where do you go to school? We do not share any personal information. In fact, if a stranger obviously you don't know. So someone you don't know starts asking personal information of you, that's an instant block for that person. Okay, maybe you want to give them one warning and say, I don't share that information online. And if they drop it, that's fine. This is something you have to talk about with your children. You have to have a boundary around unsafe strangers online. Some people are just curious and they want to know who they're playing with and what time zone you're in. And like, that's fine. That's fairly innocuous. But some people just pretend to be innocuous in order to get details on them. There are unsafe strangers online, especially in games that involve kids. That's your Fortnite, your Roblox, your public server Minecraft. There are individuals looking for personal details of young children. And then if they ever ask location, name, age, school, or if they can turn a camera on, those are all no's for internet dealing with strangers. Those are things your child needs to know are a warning flag that this person has just marked themselves as unsafe. Even if they're well-intentioned, that's unsafe. We don't play games with that. You tell an adult, you will not be in trouble. And we recognize that for what it is. So that's unsafe people, part A. Part B is internet safety with pornography. So we need to have the definition, the people not wearing clothes, being unkind with their bodies, that it's unsafe for everyone. It's unsafe to consume it. It's not good for your heart and brain. It's unsafe for the people that produced it. It's not good for their heart, brain, or body. And that we need to recognize it for what it is, that it's ungood. Ungood. It's not good. It's unsafe. So we're going to say those words with our children that they can always tell you, and that they're not going to get in trouble. Okay, that even if they looked at it on purpose, the goal is not to drop the hammer of judgment and teach them a lesson. Instead, the goal is to lovingly support them because it's damaging to them, to the others involved, and we love everyone in this, and we want to love our enemies as well as our neighbors. So we're going to do what needs to be done. We're going to report it if it's done in a public space or in an unsafe way, in a way that can be reported. We are going to get them accountability and safety. If this is friends that are sending it to us, we're going to have conversations with parents to let them know what's going on in their child's life so they can show up and parent well in a difficult tech situation. But these are the loving things, thinking about others before ourselves. That's our definition of love, and therefore we're going to take action on that. So we need to, when our kids go online, we need to build a hedge around our family. It's our time, our place, our content, our safety around strangers, and our safety with pornography. So my hope in having this conversation with you is to encourage you and equip you to parent well in a world that is just saturated with pornography. That as your children go out into digital spaces, they've shown faithful in little things in the analog spaces, and they go and extend that faithfulness in digital spaces, that we're continuing the conversation, that we're providing them safe spaces to land when mistakes are made against them, or when they make mistakes, to recognize that they now have the words to tell you about the mistake. They have the confidence that you will hear them and love them and help them in that, and that you have the confidence to address a very difficult area that maybe you wrestle with, or maybe someone you care wrestles with, that you are bearing the scars and the burdens of this difficult conversation with your sweet, amazing little child, but not doing that in a way that makes you hide and run away from the hard conversations. Instead, to run towards your child and recognize we're going into a space rife with content that encourages you to take the likeness of someone else and use it selfishly for your gratification. And then we are going to walk faithfully where God calls us to walk. Maybe that means less tech for your fam. Maybe that means more, but you're going to be there for the journey. So I hope this is encouraging for you, and that you can see how you're going to begin walking this out. We're going to have one more episode that'll talk some of the practical steps through it. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, Nathan@gospeltech.net. If this is helpful for you, would you consider sharing it with somebody and leave a rate and review wherever you listen to podcasts? Those help more people find our content. And then would you join us next week as we continue this conversation about how we can love God and use tech?